In DC, for DC. DC Radio, 96.3 HD4 and DCRadio.gov.
Hello and welcome to Inside Style, DCRadio.gov, 96.3 HD4. I am your host, George Worrell, and welcome to today's show. I have the pleasure of introducing to you today on Inside Style, Scott Bolden, Washington, D.C.'s most powerful leader on race and law and politics. Scott, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, George.
And I'm going to tell you, you do not, one of the things that I've noticed over the years was your impeccable style. And,
I hope so.
Yeah, and you have not... You've come to the bar again today, but thank you for coming in. Let's talk about you're one of the few guests that I have had on that has not hailed from Washington, D.C. You've hailed from Illinois.
Joliet, Illinois. Grew up watching my father, who was a lawyer and later a judge, try cases all over the state of Illinois. Very often he and I were, and the defendant, of course, were the only black folks in the courtroom, and watching him try cases just gave me great inspiration to follow in his footsteps. And so I've done that, having grown up in Joliet, what we used to call Prison Town, USA. Got about 3 prisons there, and they paid for my education in Morehouse as well as my law degree from Howard University, the real HU, and just cut my teeth in New York and been in Washington for the last 32 years, even though my friends like Ernie Jarvis and others won't let me be a native Washingtonian, even after 30 plus years. They're special about that.
They are. How did you find your time in New York?
I love New York. I was broke. I was making $35,000 a year in New York, but I was trying cases as a New York State prosecutor in Manhattan. I had lots of roommates. Quick funny story is my roommates were all in the banking business, and they would, they'd have to take these very serious banking tests and what have you, securities tests, and if they didn't pass them, they had to leave. They didn't get a second chance. And I took the bar for the first time in New York, and I would counsel them about you got to do better, you got to think about excellence. And so I took the bar for the first time in New York, and I failed the bar for just like they failed their banking test. And I didn't tell them for weeks because I could take the test again. But when they found out, boy, did they give me crap about it.
Agreed. And so I know you went to Howard. What brought you back down here after?
My first wife worked for the Bush 1 and with Jack Kemp. And my term, you have to serve a 3-year term. I think I served about 3.5, 4-year term at the Manhattan DA's office, and I was done. And I came back here. I was unemployed for 6 months. I was washing cars and bussing tables as a lawyer that had 50 felony trials under his belt. But the market wasn't hiring, and DOJ had a hiring freeze, and to be honest with you, I really wasn't focused on what was next. I knew I wanted to be in Washington. It was a big lawyer town. I had a game plan, but I wasn't really focused on it. So I also realized that I really wasn't good bussing tables, and I wasn't good washing cars. And the abuse I took, even as a lawyer, they didn't know I was a lawyer. And so I got to tell you, if labor and employment law, I should have gone into that. A lot of violations. That motivated me to go find a real job and go back to being a lawyer.
And what was that?
That was with Reed Smith. I had a friend of a friend who had an uncle, who had a cousin, brother, who was a recruiter and knew of this position at Reed Smith, mid-level lawyer who had litigation experience. Weldon Latham, a longtime mentor of mine, recruited me along with Singleton McAllister. And I got hired. I busted out the interview, did really well, and the rest is history. Those two would leave and go to another law firm and continue to mentor me. It was one of the best things that could have happened to me because I was there, and I really started to focus on growing my law practice. I had a skill set. I knew how to ask for the business. I was always a good seller and marketer, and I started marketing my skill set.
Did you know that? Did you know Instagram, Facebook, and all of that you had to market your brand and that we are a brand? How did you know that at that time?
Well, tell people about a love supreme of self. Now, some people call it narcissism. Some people call it egotistical. But as a lawyer and a marketeer, I'm selling legal services just like you're selling your brand, and others are selling widgets, and others are selling healthcare products. And so it's the same sale. But you got to believe in yourself. And I had a skill set to sell, and I wasn't afraid to ask for the business. But the important thing to know is, from a lawyer standpoint, most business people want to be under the radar. I want to be above the radar, because for you, and I do a lot of white-collar criminal defense work and regulatory defense litigation, I want you to know that I'm available and I'm really good, and I have really strong relationships, and I know what I'm doing. And if you're having a reputational crisis, like most people are, if you get involved in white-collar criminal defense work and stuff, I want you to know. I want to be on the list of the top 3 to 5 lawyers that you're going to call when you get in trouble when the government comes looking for you. So marketing and branding, lawyers do it a lot of different ways, but for me, building relationships with people, leading the Chamber of Commerce, leading the D.C. Democratic Party, chairing the Recreation Wish List Committee with Core Masters Berry, all of these positions gave me exposure. And then representing politicians and athletes and entertainers as a senior associate or junior partner for free, I didn't mind doing that, or for pro bono, because it was all marketing to get me to where I am right now, 30 plus years later. But now the payoff has been in the last 10 to 15 years, because I get paid for this stuff now.
But you also knew how that fine line of being out there, but being perceived as somebody that, yes, I want to spend that money with, or yes, I want him to come, but not that ambulance chaser or that, because there's a fine line there.
No, it's a big law firm. I mean, Reed Smith has 1,800 lawyers worldwide. We do everything from litigation to M&A to healthcare to aviation law. So we're all on the defense side. But, George, I didn't have a roadmap. My mentors did it the old-fashioned way. You do good work, word spreads, and then you get, so he does white collar really well. I cross-sold other practices in the firm because I wanted to make as much money as humanly possible as a lawyer. I could never make as much as my clients, but if I cross-sold and my partners were doing the work while I was doing something else, I recognized that my book of business, my law practice could grow on top of the litigation I was doing. That combination would pay me twice as much money as just litigating and getting paid for doing litigation for my clients. I am a business within a confederation of lawyers within a big business. I'm an equity partner, but I get paid based on the business I generate, the work I do, and the great results I get for clients. And so I am a business. The law practice is about selling legal services now. It's not about getting great results and having clients on repeat business. You're presumed to be excellent, right? If you're not excellent, you shouldn't be in the legal sales business. And if you think you're in this business now just practicing law, the competition is fierce. And so the only difference is the relationship between you and your client, and that only comes from you marketing, selling, and then winning the cases, whether it's an M&A case or finance case, healthcare case, or litigation.
How does entertaining and your sense of style partner with what you do?
Well, from a marketing standpoint, entertaining business leaders, politicians, and folks who are connectors or folks who can represent or refer me to their friends if I've done great work with them is the ultimate. I mean, I socialize at all levels, if you will. If you were to follow me in a day, it's cost me at least one relationship. It might cost me 2. But I love the law and getting to yes, as I call it. Whatever business you're in, I found my practice development voice, my business development voice was not only socializing but leading organizations, but building relationships with people who could determine whether they could give me their business or not. They were a decision maker. And those are usually pretty powerful people. If I could get them in a room to
and the right people in the mix.
Exactly.
That talent.
I found that my practice development voice was getting people, well-connected people, powerful people, or others in a room to support a candidate or to support a cause, right? And if I could get them in the room and I could lead that effort and I could moderate that effort and I could have conversations with 5 businesses, 10 business leaders, CEOs or general counsels in a room, I had a good shot when asking for the business or building relationships, a lot of times through humor, if you will, I could grow my business. And then on the marketing piece, you've got to know my name to call me, right? Although a lot of people call me and email me and they act like they know me. But you have to be able to market that piece and getting to say yes. I mean, early on, one of my biggest things was I would look at my feet while talking to a general counsel or a politician who I know needed some legal help in a room with a group of other people. I just started looking at my shoes, and the GC would say, "Why do you keep looking at your shoes?" I said, "I need a new pair, but I can't afford it because I haven't gotten your business yet, and I haven't been hired by you. And, I've got twin daughters that are 3 or 4 years old. Woe's me." And of course, it was a joke, and everybody would laugh. But people do business with people who they like and who they respect and who they have a strong working relationship with or some linkage to.
Something in common?
Something in common. Good word. Yeah. That shows that even though I talk for a living, I can't come up with the right words all the time.
But, I mean, you do excellent. I've been following you, and I love your commentary. A few things I would like to discuss, like your commentary on CNN about Aretha Franklin. And that's in our world and in our background. And do you find it that people are not preparing for death, or they're not preparing or having their affairs in order? And I come from a place where, my grandmother and my parents are from the South. The first thing they did was pay their health insurance, life insurance, and burial.
Right.
So to hear
$5 a week or $5 a month.
The man would come around. My grandmother would say the collector.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, and my grandparents had insurance on their kids until they were adults. So I'm just baffled that Aretha Franklin or any would. What's your feel and what's your take? Many of our audience maybe had not heard or seen that, but what was your take on that? Of having your views?
Well, it was pretty disappointing. She had an estate worth probably $80 million at one point. I think it's down to about $8 to $10 million. But Aretha Franklin had a lot of money, but she had her view of the world, right? I mean, the stories of her getting paid in cash and putting it in her purse and going on stage because there was nobody to watch her money. But she was old school. But that's good and bad. Good that she had her money and she wrote her own checks. Bad in the sense that in the end, and there was time for her to get her affairs in order. Even though she had cancer and a really rare but progressive type of cancer, to put her assets in trust. That is a living trust, a revocable trust. She could have named a trustee and put all of her assets in there and dictated what she wanted done. Not a will, but what she wanted done, naming a trustee when she was no longer going to be around, and being able to say what I wanted and where I wanted to go and who I wanted to have versus conflicting wills and what have you. You can get a will minimum, right? But that will can always be contested with an estate while you're alive. You are preparing for your death and naming trustees and healthcare powers of attorney, and you talk about whether you want to be kept alive or not, and hospice, all these things that families a lot of times are forced to think about in a very short time frame. You can think about it now. With parents, it's not always the best to talk with them about it. It's uncomfortable. It can be even emotional, but it's necessary. It's more about life once you're gone. And so many of us, unfortunately, that look like you and me, we either don't take it seriously or we put it off, right? And I can tell you lots of times I've advised people who have just put it off and their parents are no longer with us and they're struggling with their brothers and sisters about what to do with the money and the estate, and they wind up in court, and the lawyers get paid a lot of money.
People stop speaking. This person, you want this person to have this, you want that person to have that. I just don't understand it. And writing it on a piece of paper and putting it under the sofa, I don't understand that.
I got a story about that. I always thought when I heard they found it under the sofa that she was writing it out and somebody came into the room and she hid it from them and they forgot to go back and then got sick and they found it like 6 months later or a year later or something like that. And there were two competing wills. The one more recent one, I think in 2018, 19, I'm not sure, but it was the one that the court or the jury found was the real one. And that made sense because in many jurisdictions, including include in Michigan the most recent attestation or will. The most recent one, and if it's signed and it's got witnesses and what have you, there's a rebuttable presumption that that is the real will or the most current will of the deceased.
It's man, I'm sure we could talk about this all day. I just have a few more. Would love to talk about your fashion sense. How much of a role does fashion play in what you do and who you are?
Well, I'm a good Morehouse man, and being a great Morehouse man is about dressing well, right? Believing in God, being well-traveled, well-read, well-dressed, and faith in the Lord. That's probably 4 of the 7 principles of a Morehouse man, which is a Morehouse graduate. But I wore a shirt and tie in high school, man. I was serious about my business. I wanted to be a lawyer, and I got up. I wanted to dress like my father. My father was the only white-collar worker in Will County, the only black lawyer in Will County for 25 plus years, right? I had to play with a lot of people whose parents were in jail or worked at the mill or worked at the factory. It's just how it was. And so I never felt I was any different than them because my father never made a whole lot of money. But I also knew that my father was a serious lawyer and then later a judge, and he was the only man I knew of his color that wore a shirt and tie that we lived around. And he was very well respected, even as a lawyer and then later as a judge. And so I wore a shirt and tie in high school and college and law school. And to this day, even with business casual and COVID, I still get up and put a shirt and tie on. When I go to court, you got to put a shirt and tie on there. That hasn't changed. But my style, you know, I joke with my tailors about don't make it too extravagant or don't make it too kind of out there because I'm still a lawyer. But all my suits are tailor-made and shirts are tailor-cut. And with this body, I can't fit off the rack anymore. I'm older and wider. I haven't gotten any taller. But, you know, I like subtlety. But I do like my pinstripes. If you're going to cut me up a suit or a shirt, I want it to be very nice, subtle fashion, but I want people to know that it's tailor-made, right? And so I put accents on my suits and shirts that others may not, that don't cross the line into athletes or entertainers, but clearly show that this is someone who loves his clothes, loves fashion, and that I'm showing up prepared and well-dressed because that gives me confidence in the courtroom, in the boardroom, and at my law firm. And so instead of having a full double vent, I may have a half double vent, right, or a third cut on both sides. I may have a 4-button suit, no more than 4, usually 3, and I just button with 1 button. I have the floating buttons on my sleeves. I want subtlety for someone who's looking at a well-dressed man and a cut of his suit and shirt. I want them to know that there's something different about this. Whether it's the collar and
it's something different about you.
Yes, very much so.
And that, yeah.
My shirts, I have hidden buttons. You know, I don't usually show the buttons. You know, it's got a layer of fabric across. They're hidden. Those types of subtleties I like because I want someone who's looking at me or interviewing me to try to figure out what's different about this guy who's well-spoken, but also well-dressed and takes pride in looking good. There's nothing wrong with looking good. I never want to look disheveled. My mother used to say, if you wear a shirt and a tie like your daddy, you'll never show up underdressed. And, you know, that along with the Emmett Till story and staying away from women that don't look like her and my sister, you know, had an indelible mark on my psyche growing up as a young black man.
Well, I thank you so much for coming on and talking with us.
Thank you for having me, man.
We're going to have to pick up this conversation again because...
Give me another question, man. I love this. I get to talk about myself and my style and my
your
career.
style. I mean, there are things that, and it's a conversation. I know you have another appointment, but I thank you for coming on. How can our listeners find you on social media?
Sure. ASB The Law on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn, A. Scott Bolden at Reed Smith. I am on all the social media platforms for sure. And then you can catch me every Wednesday evening on the Roland Martin Show.
Okay.
He and I go at it, and it's a lot of fun. He's a great guy. He's got a large following, and he's doing some incredible things in the media space that is black media.
Okay.
And as an investor and someone that's giving people a lot of, he's got the Black Star Network, where they have a lot of shows hosted by people who also run his show on during the week, from 6 to 8, I think.
Okay.
And then I'm at abolden@reedsmith.com by email. It's public information. I can share that with them because I get my critics and my supporters to have no problem pushing back on something I've said on CNN or Fox News, especially Fox News. But in any event, though, love to hear from people.
But yeah, thank you so much for coming. I'm just amazed, and I got to know you a lot better. I would like to thank our sponsor, Miller Furs, who is the best place to store and service and clean your furs and outerwear. They also carry the area's largest selection of pre-owned furs. Miller Furs has been in Washington institution since 1921, over 100 years of fashion and value in the nation's capital. Thank you for tuning in to Inside Style, DC Radio 96.3 HD4. I am George Worrell, and remember, real style starts with being comfortable in your own skin. We'll see you next time.
In DC, for DC. DC Radio, 96.3 HD4 and DCRadio.gov.